everyone. This is Sofia Smallstorm. I'm back with another podcast, and I've had some flat tires this summer as far as podcasts are going. Some cancellations and reversals on the part of the guest. They didn't want that particular podcast aired, so forgive me if I haven't been on track for the last couple of months, but I am back today. And today I have a guest who's very impressive. You may not have ever heard of her, but I want people to now be hearing of her. She is Dr. Laura Pressley. She is from Austin, Texas, which is in Travis County. And she has brought a lawsuit, a court case, that is now in front of the Texas Supreme Court. And it concerns voting, electronic voting practices in Texas, of course. But we have all heard of vote hacking, and this is how I got to meet Laura Pressley, a friend of mine who had written a book on voting and the fraud. We've all been familiar with this since the 2000 election, and I've heard that it had happened long before that too. Vote fraud, basically. My friend Vicky knew Laura quite well and introduced me to her, and I felt compelled to interview her. So here is Laura Pressley, Dr. Laura Pressley, mechanical engineer, PhD, very, very impressive person. Please welcome Laura. How are you?
Oh, Sophia, I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for being interested in this topic of electronic voting fraud and corruption. So many of us have voted on these electronic voting machines around the country, and we know that there's a problem. Our intuition, our soul tells us that there's an issue there, that there's no backup record, so how can we trust these machines? And there have been a lot of theories over the last 15 to 20 years that these things have been in play in our country. And so I ran for the Austin City Council here in Austin, Texas, and my background is computer technology. I have 4 U.S. patents on computer device engineering, semiconductor device engineering. I was an engineer in the semiconductor industry here in Austin, Texas. I've co-authored many peer-reviewed articles on technology. And so I'm not the person you want to steal an election from with a computer because I know how they work. So I ran for city council. There needed to be some fiscal responsibility in my community, and so I decided to run. And what happened to me was just incredible. You know, we've always had this intuition that something is not right, but we've never had complete proof of what the issues are and how hacking of electronic computer systems occur. You know, we've worked with my friend Vicky Karp here in Austin, Texas. We've worked with Bev Harris, who's one of the foremost leaders in computer hacking for elections. And we all have these theories, but in our case, we have proof of how it occurs. So I ran for the city council. I knew I had won the election. We have done professional polling. We had a very professional campaign with block walking, phone banking, all of these electioneers at the polls. All of this was very professional. We knew I had won the election, and what came back as election results on election night just blew me away. Supposedly my 24-year-old little opponent who had just moved into my district 2 weeks before the deadline of anybody that could run in the election somehow beat me 2-1. And there's absolutely no way. I've lived in Austin almost 30 years. I'm in my 50s. I've done so much activism here in my district, in my neighborhood. I was neighborhood president, all of this. There's no way this kid beat me 2-1 in my election, so I knew it. And so the first steps you have to take as a candidate, see, candidates are the ones that have standing to bring these lawsuits for electronic voting corruption or fraud or any type of election fraud. And candidates there's a lot of pressure put on us to not go the next step and file a lawsuit or even complain about election integrity because you get called a sore loser, blah, blah, blah. You know, it goes on and on, all the negative stuff that they will continue to press on a poor little candidate who's absolutely worn out of money, you know, and it hurts to lose, okay? So when you get to that stage...
I'd like to interrupt you here because I did not realize that your opponent was a mere 24 years old and had just moved into the district. I mean, on its face, that's horrible.
Exactly. It's horrible. And you know, there's more, and I don't want to get into all of that, but those are that just makes you question the face value of a 24, 25-year-old beating, an established activist who's been in the area for forever, neighborhood president, all of this, and beats them 2-1. There's just no way. Okay. And so as a candidate, you have to be confident that you won the election, or you can't do what we've done. And it's been 2.5 years down this path of a lawsuit. And we, initially what we did, I got up the next morning, and my background is technology and computer engineering and all this stuff, and I have a PhD in physical chemistry from the University of Texas at Austin. So I'm good with Excel. I'm good at math. So I got up the next morning, this little 2-1 result. I didn't believe it by any stretch of the imagination. And I got up and started analyzing a bunch of data. And I can do that because I know how to run Excel. So I looked at every single precinct in my district. It was a small little city council race. It's only 18 precincts. A small thing, right? So I looked at all of these precincts, and I'll tell you one thing, mathematical patterns started to show themselves. And I looked at the data in a lot of different ways, because whenever there's a hack, whenever there's someone that's stolen an election, there's a system that they're using. And so one of the things Bev Harris always says is look for patterns. So I did, and I found them. I found a statistical mathematical pattern that was not normal. So that was the first thing that told me something was wrong. And being an engineer and being a manager of different engineers throughout my career, when I saw these patterns, I knew something was wrong. Now, another candidate who didn't have the background that I have wouldn't have noticed it or wouldn't have known what to look for. And these patterns that I found were so egregious that I've shut $1 billion factory, semiconductor factory down on data less correlated than what I found in my election. Okay, so I knew what I was looking at. So I did one thing after that. I started reading the election code in Texas. And I can read for comprehension. The election laws across the state are written in a very common language so that people understand them, candidates and consultants and lawyers and, everybody, because everybody participates in elections. A lot of people participate in elections. So I read the election code. It's about 200 chapters, and I was looking for one thing, Sophia. I looked for what are the backup records that have to be saved in a county for electronic voting in Texas. And God bless the legislature, they put some wonderful laws in place. And guess what? We weren't following them. Okay, have you ever heard of that? I mean, and I'm being facetious, but we see this all the time. The laws are on the books and we don't follow them. Well, how do you expect to have an honest election if you're not following the state laws? We also noticed that the state constitution in Texas requires that all the ballots be numbered. And why do you number a ballot? Well, you want to know in case there's any extras. You want to track and trace every ballot. You want to know if there's any extra ones, if there's duplicates, if there's some missing. So the numbering of ballots in Texas, and I'm going to step outside of Texas and say across the country, is really what I would call the holy grail of election integrity. Because you as a voter, you see your ballot number, you know who you voted for, and in a recount, when you go back to that ballot, a paper ballot or electronic reproduction of your ballot, if your ballot number and your vote is not consistent with how you voted, then you have proof of fraud, Sophia. So I present and I represent that numbering of ballots is the holy grail of election integrity in this country, and for certainly in my state in Texas. So when we got to challenging the election results, so the first step was to do a recount. Well, of course, it's expensive, and we raised the money to do the recount. And when I showed up to the recount, I was taken into a room by the county clerk, and they said, Dr. Pressley, we need to let you know something. We cannot give you a legal ballot for the recount. We can't give you what's called a ballot image as required what's in the election code, but we can give you something else. And the Secretary of State of Texas says, that's just fine. It's a legal ballot. And I'm like, well, let's see what it looks like. So when we did the recount, and this was, the first step into challenging the election as a candidate, there were two types of ballots. There were paper absentee ballots that people had cast, and then there were electronic ballots that were cast on these electronic voting machines here in my county and in Texas. The paper ballots, the paper absentee ballots, were exactly tied when we did the recount. It was exactly 240 to 240. It was not 2-1, Sophia. But when we got to the electronic ballots, they could not produce a legal ballot for a recount. Who knows where they came up with these pieces of paper that they used for the recount? They were not numbered. They were not in any way looking like a ballot that I cast or that anybody cast in the election. It was a template that was printed one per page for what the main computer said the voter had voted. And, I have dealt with PDF documents, Sophia, and a lot of your listeners probably use Adobe Acrobat PDF software. And you can move PDF pages in and out. You can delete them. You can add them back in. These pages that they used to print from some PDF that God knows where it came from, the ballot numbers were not on them.
I'd like to ask you if they gave you a reason for why they couldn't give you the other kind of...
Yes, they said the Secretary of State says this is fine. That was the reason we were told. Yeah, the machines can't do it, and the Secretary of State says it's okay. And me, I'm an engineer, and I go off of specs. I have in my whole career. I spent 17 years in the semiconductor industry. I go off of specifications. Well, the election code is a spec for how the counties are to run elections and what the laws are. And so I'm going, this is, this doesn't work with me. Maybe someone else, but it doesn't work with me. You're supposed to give me a legal ballot with a number on it, and you're not producing that. So you know what? We're going to file a lawsuit and say this is not a legal recount.
Why couldn't the machines do it?
It's a great question, Sophia. And you know what? I went back, and I have patents. So I went back and read the patents for the equipment that were filed. Gosh, it was filed over 15, 17 years ago. And actually the patents on this equipment that we use, it's Hard Intercivic, actually says they can keep a true ballot image. Okay? So where is it? Where is this document that you're supposed to have? Well, most candidates would just kind of curl up and go away. Well, we said, no, we're filing a lawsuit because this is not following state law or the state constitution. So, long story short, we filed this lawsuit. We identified all of the issues that they did not follow state law here in Texas to document the vote and document the backup records for the vote. And we're the first candidate in the state that's ever brought this type of lawsuit in Texas. And, we were at the district court level, we were at the appeals court level, and now we are at the Texas Supreme Court. And in the district court level, it was very interesting. We had all this data and all these records that don't meet state law. There was another thing that they did really egregiously in my election. And I don't know if any of your listeners have ever been an election judge, but election judges, when the polls close in Texas, when the polls close on election night, and you have these electronic voting machines, the judges are supposed to print out what's called a results tape. And it's a results of every single election, every candidate, every measure or proposition that's on the ballot. And this results tape documents for the voters at that location how the numbers came out for, let's say, Donald Trump, how many people voted for Donald Trump, how many people voted for Hillary Clinton, how many people voted for Gary Johnson in the presidential election as Libertarian Party. So each candidate has the result of their votes at that location. And election judges are supposed to print this tape, a physical piece of paper with the data on it. They're supposed to sign it, and the county's supposed to keep that record in case something happens with that electronic equipment after the fact. Let's say the judges are driving the machines back to the county, and there's a wreck, and there's a fire, and you lose all the memory cards or whatever. There's a paper record somewhere of that result, okay? And it's a mandatory law. There's a criminal penalty in Texas if you don't supply the election returns for your location as a judge. It's a criminal penalty. So when you're an election judge in Texas, we're not just playing Monopoly. It's a very serious role. It's a very serious job you're doing. And so the county, interestingly, in our race, told the election judges, don't print the tape. When the polls close, don't print it. So not only do we not have a legal ballot to do a recount, now we don't have the results tape that's required by state law. And they told election judges not to print it. And we have the actual envelope that judges read at the polls that says do not print it. And so we had that in evidence. We had that. We had a letter from the Secretary of State of Texas telling the county, don't worry, don't print the tape, because ballot images remain on the equipment for recounts. Until you ask, Sophia. When we asked for the ballot images, they couldn't produce them. So not only don't they have the ballot, they don't have the tape. So the two main backup records for elections in Texas are being waived by the Secretary of State's office, the elections division there. And so we said, no, this is not going to happen. This is not legal. We are going to challenge this in a court of law. So we did. And in our contest, our election contest, we had probably 12,000 pages of evidence and of documents, because these election records are very extensive. And so we had all of this evidence. And there's a third record that's I'm kind of getting into the weeds, but a lot of people wonder how this hacking happens. How can this happen? Well, first of all, you've got to do away with all the backup records, right? If you're going to hack a computer, you can't have these pesky backup records that prove what the real vote was. Okay, that's the first thing you have to get rid of. Well, check those two boxes, because Travis County did that. There's no ballot image that's numbered, and there's no tape to prove what the results were before the equipment went down to the county office. There's a third record that's very important in Texas, and it's called the audit log of the main computer where the votes are tallied up. At the precincts, judges have what's called memory cards. All the votes are stored on these memory cards. And so if you want to hack an election, Sophia, all you have to do is be at the main computer of the county office where all these memory cards merge. You don't have to be at the precincts, at the polling locations where there are a lot of judges and a lot of people watching. All you have to do is be at the main computer where all those memory cards come to you, and nobody's watching there. And so we, in our election lawsuit, we asked in discovery for the audit log of the main computer, and what we found was shocking. On the audit log, which is a time date stamp of everything that happens on the main computer, where all the votes are being added up, all those memory cards are being inserted, on that audit log, it showed corruption errors. Memory cards were being put in when no one was watching that the computer did not recognize. They did not recognize the encryption that has to be there. And so what it looked like was that these corrupt cards were being put in and potentially backwriting all of the data and changing the election result. Well, if you don't have a tape and you don't have a ballot image of the original ballot, you can change the result at the main computer when no one's watching. And so there were these corruption errors over and over. And actually there was one card that was corrupt. It was the card ID was number 603. And so then we got the audit log of the computer that programmed this card number 603. That audit log was also very, very concerning. It showed that 603 was put in on one day and then logged out 10 days later. We don't know where that card was for 10 days. And then again, that same card was logged in, and then it was logged out 9 days later. 19 days, Sophia, that corrupt card. We don't know where it was, who had it. Did it go off-site? Did it come back in? No wonder the computer registered it as corrupt, because it didn't have the correct encryption on the card. And so in our lawsuit, we asked the judge, we want to get to number 603. We had a computer expert that was an expert witness. We want 603, and we want our expert to analyze it. The judge said no and threw us out of court for a frivolous lawsuit.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. Now, this, which you have revealed to us about the memory cards being so easily switched or swapped out. I learned about this last fall because Bev Harris of Black Box Voting had posted a video that informed some guy in, I think it was Tennessee or something, he had figured it out, right? I posted this video on my blog, and I'm going to link to it in the show description so people get a little deeper understanding. But were you aware of this potentiality, let's just say, before you actually discovered what had happened? So you knew that there was an audit log for the main computer, right?
Right. So, yeah, our case, all of this happened before Bev Harris did her stuff. So it's and you make a good link here. Our case, we got the audit logs. I was working with Bev Harris about the ballot images and the audit logs, and so that was giving her kind of the idea. And see, we've had theories over the last 15 years of how this happens, okay? But we've never had proof positive. We never had evidence of how it happens. So our case has been, I would say, one of the enablers to have the other election integrity experts kind of go to the next level. So our evidence, we were talking to Bev Harris, and I said, Bev, they're not producing ballot images. The audit logs have corruption errors. And she was like, wow, we've not really thought about these ballot image issues or these, audit log corrupt, because I was the first candidate in the country that has ever gotten these audit logs, Sophia, and you can only get them in a lawsuit, okay? Before we started this, no one would hand over these audit logs. And so we are the first candidate in the country that's ever gotten these audit logs before. And so we were sharing this with Bev Harris and her people. And so after all of that information she had, then she went to the next level and said, this fraction magic thing is how this thing's happening from the programming at the main computer. So we were part of that effort, and I would say just a consciousness of the country trying to figure out how this is really happening. And so everybody has their component, everybody is a player, and everybody gets their add a piece to the puzzle, and the puzzle starts becoming really visible to everybody. So yeah, the work that she did with the fraction magic was kind of after we had showed her, this is one of the theories we think is how it really is happening.
Right, I remember that term now, fraction magic, and that was fascinating. Yeah. And you're right, you ran in 2014, you brought the suit in 2015, and this video was new in 2016. That's right. Yeah, and Laura, I want to have the listeners hear what you told me about activism that you had pursued in other areas, and now in this voting area, how there isn't another side to this.
Yes, this has been a real challenge over the last 2.5 years, because we have been denigrated in the press, and personally, they do personal attacks, all of this to get us to stop, right? Well, that kind of just rolls off my back, and I tell my ego to take a back seat. We have work to do, okay? We've got very important work to do. This is not about ego. And so, the judge threw us out of court, said we had a frivolous lawsuit, and then he sanctioned us, which is a financial punishment of almost $100,000 for a frivolous lawsuit, okay? And then what they tried to do, they said, we will not pursue the sanctions and the financial punishment, Dr. Pressley, if you will not appeal this case. And so that was very compelling at the time, okay? It was because we already had huge legal bills, and we'd had some donors help us with the cost, but my husband and I were really, this was on our shoulders to make sure everybody got paid, all the lawyers and all the experts and everything, regardless of the donations that were coming in. We were the ones who were going to pay everybody, okay, make sure that they got paid. So this was a huge, compelling, carrot that was dangled in front of us. And we sat and we thought about it for a very long time, and my husband and I said, no, we're going to appeal, because this corruption is happening. We are not going to stand by. This is a great case. We have all the evidence, first case in the country that's ever gotten this far. We're going to move forward. And so we did. So we went to the appeals court. The appeals court, the first level appeals, is called the Third Court of Appeals here in Austin, upheld the judge. The judge wouldn't give us evidence, and then said we didn't have any, and then wouldn't let us get to the memory card, and then said we had a frivolous case when we had all this evidence. And it was all based on law, and it was all based on good faith of bringing these cases and good faith interpretation of the statutes of Texas. And I had 2 lawyers that supported everything we were doing. And so the appeals court sanctioned us another $25,000 on top of that. And so we were challenged again. Do we pursue and keep going to the Texas Supreme Court, or do we give up? And there's no way we were going to give up. We could only see the path forward. So we decided to go with the Texas Supreme Court, and I'm doing this pro se. I'm writing the briefs myself. I understand the law very well, and I've got a couple of lawyers helping us in the background, making sure we do everything. We're not missing any kind of technicality, and we're so grateful for those lawyers that are helping us at a reduced rate, because I'm writing the briefs and they're reviewing them. So we're now in the Texas Supreme Court, and the court has moved us to the next level, where they demanded that our opponent write a response, and we had to do another reply. And the best news is, so far, the Texas Attorney General has written a brief supporting the issues that we've raised, and they've asked the court to please carry the case all the way through to briefing and to hear the case out. So that is, that's kind of the end of the story, and exactly what you said. Sophia, I have been an activist my whole life. Since I was even a little girl, I used to register people to vote, when I was in high school, when I first could vote, and I really believe in the voting system. And I grew up on a farm. My dad was an auctioneer at the stockyards in Fort Worth. We had a dairy. My family's a working class, self-educated group of people who really have always stood up for what's right, and my dad raised us that way. And so I've been an activist over a lot of different things in my life, and most of them have been related to technology or chemistry or, science and technology. And what I have found is this issue, integrity of our elections, really is the core. It really is the root that feeds all the other issues that we care about, whether it's taxes or liberty or the police state, or honesty with our legislation, all of it, everything that we, our First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, all those things all are dependent upon a representative form of government. And if our elections are not honest and fair, what do we have? And I believe over the last 15 to 17 years, our liberties have been degraded at an exponential rate compared to corruption that had happened prior to that. And I believe it's because of this electronic voting. It's so easy to corrupt an election. You only need one or two people to do it. To change 100,000 votes, all you need are one or two people. Think of 15, 20 years ago when we had paper ballots. How many people would it take, Sophia, to corrupt 100,000 paper ballots? It took a lot of people, and a lot of people talk, and you can catch them, making mistakes, because humans make mistakes. But when you want to talk about changing 100,000 votes with an electronic machine, it only takes one or two people, and nobody knows it happened, and we just sit around blaming each other. You didn't vote right, Sophia. I voted right because I know I did. So we blame each other, and it really disintegrates the trust of the community because you didn't vote right and I did. Well, you know what, Sophia? Maybe we all are voting in a correct way for honest and true elections, but one or two people are controlling the outcome.
Yeah, I'm hearing everything you're saying, and there's points at which I've gotten chills, and I can't believe that you discovered what you discovered, and you preceded the black box voting people and actually fed into their pipeline so that they could come up with that fraction magic video, which was very revealing and amazing. So good for you, first of all, and then good for you for not quitting. That is amazing as well. I'm so glad that you were raised the way you were and you've carried that into your adulthood. And then also what you were talking about in activism, when we were talking prior to this recording, you mentioned that if you're an activist, against vaccines or against fluoridation, these other causes that people have taken up, there is brainwashing that is being deployed against that kind of activism. There's enough brainwashing out there that tells us vaccines are safe and effective, that fluoride does strengthen your tooth enamel, et cetera, et cetera. But where is the brainwashing that tells people hacking votes is a good thing, right?
Right. So, I've been an activist on a lot of different issues over my career. I'm a chemist. My PhD's in chemistry and physics, and I've used fluoridated compounds to etch computer chips. So I know the dangers of fluoride. I've published on fluoridated compounds in peer-reviewed journals. Okay, so I know how fluorine works on systems. I understand the chemistry of it. So I've been an activist for fluoridation. I've been an activist against the TSA scanners because they're microwave technology that's hurting people. So I've been an activist on a lot of different issues. And I'll tell you one thing, this election integrity issue is the easiest because everybody agrees with honest and fair elections. All we want to do, Sophia, is we want to block walk and phone bank and vote for our candidate because we believe they're the right one. They're the best one, and let the chips fall. We have a representative form of government in our country, and we have had, hundreds of years of veterans and people who have sacrificed and really pressed their own personal belief that this is the way to go. We want a representative form of republic, a republic set up with laws and everybody has to adhere to, not just a few people. This issue is it's a populist issue. Everybody agrees with it, except those who want to change the result. And those guys are few and far between. There's many more of us. And so as I go around Texas, our lawsuit right now, we're in the Texas Supreme Court. We're in I would say the mid stages of the Supreme Court process. There's a lot of things you have to file and do at certain timings and all of that. But we're in about the mid stages right now. And I've been all over Texas raising money for this lawsuit because I cannot afford this. Our case right now is about $300,000. And I'll tell you another thing. To get to the Texas Supreme Court and to be successful there, it costs about $1 million. And so we're about one-third the cost. So we've done very well at being frugal and doing this thing smart and being pro se, which means I write the briefs, and I do a lot of prayer, and I do a lot of meditation, and I do believe that I'm a very open person, and so I take a lot of advice, and I can weigh it out, and this looks good, this doesn't, we're going to move forward on this model of approaching this case in the Texas Supreme Court. So I've been all over the state of Texas. I've given 180 presentations in the last 2 years raising money for this, and people have helped. People donate from $5 to thousands of dollars to help this case move forward because we're the only one in the country who's doing it. We're the only one in the country at this level. And you can theorize all day long, Sophia, on how it could happen. This could happen, that could happen, but our case has evidence of how it happens. And it takes a lot of work to get where we are, and we're at the end of that road, and we just need the little push to get us a little further. So I'm going to give out my website. So if people are interested in watching our case and getting on our distribution list to keep updated on what the case is doing and if they'd like to donate, our website is Pressley, PRESSLEY, FORAUSTIN.com, Pressley4Austin.com, and there's a donate page on there, and you can email me, and I'll give my email address. It's Laura Pressley at startmail.com, and it's LauraPressley at startmail.com, and I will put you on my distribution list and keep you updated. And I do updates probably once every 2 to 3 weeks on kind of what's going on in Texas, and we're trying to get Secretary of State to follow state law. And really the end game here for our lawsuit, because the election term is over, but I want to run again as a candidate, and if we don't address these issues now, these same issues are going to happen again just because the legal system takes so long in Texas, and all legal processes take a long time to go through district court, appeals court, Supreme Court. Those things take so long that this issue will recur. It will recur for me. It will recur for other candidates in the state. And so this is a ripe issue, and we want this addressed because the Secretary of State is not following state law. And so our case is asking for the court to give guidance to the Secretary of State to ensure that the electronic voting systems number ballots, that you have a numbered ballot for a recount. You have to have a legal ballot for a recount. You cannot waive mandatory election laws, Secretary of State. You cannot tell election judges to commit a criminal offense by not printing their tape. And we want the sanctions to be removed. We don't want this $100,000 of legal punishment for me to have to go pay that for bringing a good faith lawsuit that is based on the state constitution and state laws. And so that's what we're asking the Supreme Court to do for us, to give the Secretary of State guidance, tell them you have to number ballots and you have to print these tapes for honest elections in Texas.
No, I think that's all really commendable. And I'd like to just ask, so this guy, your opponent, he received a spot on the city council for quote unquote winning this election, and he has served a term that is now ending. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And can I ask you this? And you don't have to answer it, but I just want to put it out there. So the election was interfered with, I'm presuming, because either there were entities who did not want you to win, or they actually wanted him to win. So have you thought about the reasons that you might not have been wanted on the city council?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, Sophia, you're right on. Absolutely. And it kind of bears it out, over the last 2 years of him being on the council and kind of what he's been involved in. One of the things they did not want on the council was someone who understood budgets, understood the technical components of different parts of the city government, like the electric company. I had done a lot of work in the industry, in the computer industry, on lean business practices, where you can cut costs and you can get waste out of certain groups or organizations. And so I was really focused on, in my campaign, on ending private-public partnerships and cutting costs in the utility department to keep the electricity costs for the citizens low as possible. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and I had outlined a whole strategy for that. And it was funny, the summer before the election, there was a public-private partnership that was proposed at City Hall. They were proposing an $8 million subsidy to this organization, and I got up and spoke and had several other people speak, and we saved $4 million in 20 minutes. Imagine what I could have done on that council being the watchdog, okay, every day in and day out, how much money we would have saved. We would have cut off the gravy train, all right? They couldn't have that.
Right.
Couldn't have it. And so that was the reason why, and I'm very vocal. I did not support fluoridation, which City of Austin fluoridates. I'm a chemist. I understand the technical details. I understand the MSDS sheets for these chemicals, and we use them in the semiconductor industry all the time. And so they could not have that. They could not have someone who really understood budgets, understood how to cut costs, understood that public-private partnerships were just increasing the taxes on the backs of citizens and all of it. So I was the last person they wanted to challenge, to be up there and be vocal. And I'm a good leader. I'm a very sincere leader. I can get people together. I can build a coalition. They can't have that.
No, you would have gone against the plans of the New World Order. You know too much. You're too sophisticated. And it would be far better to have somebody in his basically early 20s.
A 24-year-old.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that boggles my mind.
I know, isn't it shocking? It's like, and I'll tell you what, my district, it's a very interesting district. It's one of the poorest districts in Austin. It's a very economically challenged area. It's about 28 square miles, and we have about 50 churches. And this little 24-year-old had written a paper just 2 years prior that he was an atheist, okay? And we made sure every voter knew it. And I'm a very, I believe in God, and I've just been very faithful my whole life, and just go on and on about it. But this little kid wrote a paper that he was an atheist, and we made sure every voter knew it. And we're in a low-income area with a high Hispanic, Catholic population, high African-American population that's very faithful, and we have 50 churches, okay? We're not electing an atheist. We don't do that. Poor people, which I've been poor, we don't do that. That's not what we do. So there's nothing they could do to get this kid to win. Nothing.
But
even
let
the
me.
polls showed it.
I have one question.
Okay.
The absentee ballots, when you counted them, were tied.
Yes, they were exactly tied.
Right. It seems to me, though, that what you're describing is a situation that shouldn't have shown a tie in even those ballots. You should have.
I agree with you. I know that. Yes, exactly. But our whole argument was legally, and this was a legal strategy we did. We said the only legal ballots are those absentee ballots, and they're tied, so that means we need a new election. And since the equipment can't keep a legal ballot image that's numbered, we're going to have to go back to paper ballots for this little re-election that y'all messed up on. And so then we were going to go down the path of a paper ballot election for just this one, just he and I. It would have been easy to administer by the county. And so that was a legal strategy that we did. I didn't believe, honestly, the absentee ballots. I thought that there were some issues there with that, but we kind of let that go and said they're tied. Those are the only legal ballots in the race. So now we have to have a new election because there's no victor. And let's use paper going forward because the electronic voting machines can't meet state law. That was our legal strategy.
That is a great point, though. Yeah,
it is. And I didn't claim as I won. I wasn't out there being overly confident that I had won the election. All I knew is there was no victor. And so that was a safer place legally to be from a strategy standpoint, and we chose to do that. And it really was a good, reasonable, true argument. It was an honest argument that the county they couldn't even challenge that because the paper, which is the only legal ballot that had a number, was tied. You got to go back and do it again. To throw out those 4,000 ballots, we don't know where the heck they came from. They weren't numbered. They were in some PDF document that could have been moved in and out. There was no traceability for that. So now, you kind of, you're so smart that you go into these more details that, typically I don't really get into, but yeah.
So I want to ask you something else, which is somewhat speculative. As I was watching election night transpire on television, I realized, having been made aware by the video that Bev Harris created on this, what's it called? Fraction Magic? Yeah.
Fraction Magic, yeah.
Yeah, Fraction Magic. That they could do anything they wanted with the election. They could give it to Hillary, they could give it to Trump. They could tie it. There was a point at which, based on the number of electoral votes that she either didn't have, there was some number of electoral votes that had she won 2 more states, the thing would have been tied. And I thought, oh no, that is going to be the worst nightmare if this is tied. But they could have done anything. That was my very strong gut feeling. And the election went to Trump, as we all know. So here's my question. As you've been making the rounds, giving these speeches, granted, we're still not even done with the first year of Trump, but had Hillary taken the election, I would think that you would have a lot more people really, really riled up because of her lack of popularity. And my hope is that very rich people all over the country will hear your interview, not necessarily with me, but your presentation to somebody, and will say, I'm going to throw thousands of dollars at this case because this is a groundbreaking case. But since Trump won, I feel like, oh my, the fever isn't as high right now. Do you get what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying, and you're exactly right, Sophia. It's kind of like we barely pulled it off. Honest elections just barely pulled it off. And, she was very unpopular. I think the Democrat Party would have done much better if they'd had Bernie Sanders. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a Republican precinct chair here in Travis County. I'm a very conservative. I'm a Christian conservative. That's really what I say about myself. And if it had been stolen so massively for her, this country we would be up in arms about this. It would have been over the top. There's no way on earth. And I do think Trump probably won more than what was reported, okay? He probably won 70%, even in Texas. Okay, in Texas, Trump only won by like 5%, 3 to 5%. And I said, no way on earth. Okay, not in Texas. So Texas has some really serious issues. We don't have we don't have the backup records required by law. That's an absolute factual statement. We do not have the backup election records as required by our state constitution and state law. And so there's no telling what the results really were on election night in November. Okay, there's no telling what they really, really were. And you're exactly right. If Hillary if it had been stolen so massively that she was declared the victor, it would have been all out. No one would trust the election system at all. I mean, that would have just tipped us over the edge.
Right. Yeah. You need that extra, whatever it is, 700,000 to get your case through the Texas Supreme Court. And with the way it looks, the Attorney General's support, this is very, very important. You're a pioneer for America in this regard, and I wish people could hear of this. I will do my best to get you on some other shows so that people understand that this little case in Travis County, this has the potential to break a ton of ground. I mean, it's like a big backhoe,
You're exactly right, Sophia, because I think we have really outlined, and the media will cover all day long this illegals voting or dead people voting issue, okay? And I'm going to tell you something, that's 5% of the vote, okay? Those are pennies on the dollar relative to this issue. This electronic corruption, how it happens, how counties cover for it, how the backup records are not retained, which enables it to go forward. The mainstream media will not touch this issue, will not touch electronic voting corruption because it's too dirty. It's too difficult. Because once the public realizes this, Everything else goes out the window. All right? Our elected representative form of government is now invalid, and it's illegitimate. Okay? But I do want to say there are honest and fair elections that are happening across the country. There are some that are happening in Texas. We want more of that, and that's what we're pressing for. If the backup records are there, it's a lot harder to commit fraud. Okay? And you are exactly right. The mainstream media will not cover this topic because we are over the target so well. The evidence is irrefutable. The judge all day long can say we don't have evidence, but we do. Okay? And it's irrefutable when people look at the data and listen to the story and listen about how it really can happen. This is the big issue. And so, yeah, we would love any contributions. We are in about $60,000 worth of personal debt myself, and we still have about another, I would say $15,000 is all we need to finish this case in the court, in the Texas Supreme Court. We have been so frugal. Normally it would take $1 million to get to where we are right now, and we're at $300K. And it's because all the grassroots, we've had large donors and a lot of small donors that have helped us. And we have a coalition of people across the state and across the country that are watching this case. And they are keeping it in their prayers. And this is going to succeed. And we're going to have honest and fair elections across the country, across Texas, because of this case.
And so it's just 15,000. I was taking that $1 million figure to be.
Oh, well, that's what normally. Yeah, good question. It normally would cost about $1 million to get to where we are, and we have been so frugal and so efficient with our case. We've not made really any mistakes, which you have to pay for and other things. Going down a rat trail that you don't need to legally, and all of this. We've just really narrowed this topic so beautifully that cost us $300K so far. My husband and I have put in $60,000 of our own money. We've raised about $240,000 around the state, and we need about another $15,000 to finish the case.
That is not a lot of money.
It's pennies. It's pennies.
Right. That's not a lot of money.
It's not.
That's very, very little money. That's very doable, actually. I'm very happy to hear that. I was a little bit daunted by that $700,000. But I want to ask you this. What about those sanctions? Are they included in that $300,000?
Oh no, they're not. That's another $100K that we're asking the Supreme Court to remove those sanctions because our case is based in law. It was brought in good faith. It's not frivolous. It's not done to harm anybody. It was brought for the good of the state, and that $100K is up for the court to remove. And what's interesting, Sophia, I'm the first candidate in the state of Texas that's ever been sanctioned for an election contest in the history of Texas. For the last 150 years, there's never been one candidate before that had these sanctions passed an appeals court that didn't just overturn them because they were stupid. We're the first candidate in the history of the state of Texas that this has ever happened to. We are over the target, my dear. They had to do everything they could to discredit our case, and it's not working.
And it also shows how deeply, I don't know the word for it, I want to say corrupt, but that's not even a good word, it's been overused, how upside down this all is. The fact that you would be sanctioned in the first place, that they would try to make those sanctions stick, that the second court would add more sanctions.
Right.
That's
exactly.
They're trying to scare you.
Oh, they are, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And like I said, early on, my husband and I agreed together. This is very important. This is for the future of our country. This is for the future of our state. This is the future of our planet. Okay, it really is. So we know what's at stake here, and we had a choice, Sophia. Do we step up and take personal responsibility, or my husband and I, do we step back and be a victim? And we decided to step up. And we're pushing forward. We know we're in the truth. We know we're in the right. And people are helping us. We've built a coalition around the state and around the country. And just God bless you for getting this word out because the mainstream media won't touch it. And God bless you and the grassroots and all of us that are pushing for the truth and pushing for honest elections because everything is dependent on that. Everything else is built on that base. And we're going to have it. We're going to have honest elections. We are.
Do you have a GoFundMe?
I don't. And what's interesting is GoFundMe won't do political stuff. They disallow it. Every time I try to set it up, they won't let me do it. And when I do the description, they say, this seems political. And it is not a partisan issue. This is a political issue, but it's bipartisan, so they don't support that. So what we do is we take donations through our website at pressleyfораustin.com, or if you want to be on my distribution list, I'll put you on my distribution list, and we'll send updates out where you can donate on those email blasts that go out. There's a donate page on it. So we have a couple of ways that people can do it. My home address is on my website. People can mail me a check, and we can do snail mail. There's a lot of ways we can donate. People can do online. They can do snail mail, checks. If you send me cash, I have to have your address and everything, because I have to document all the donations we get. We have to make sure all of that's tracked and traced.
No, this is excellent. I think that is so doable. It's such a small number.
It is a small number for such a big return. I mean, it's huge. And how we've come so far, it's incredible. It really is. And I'm just so grateful for the people that have helped us get where we are. And more people are going to help us as we move forward, and we love that. And I'm not here by myself. I'm going to tell you that. There's a lot of people who have helped, a lot of lawyers, a lot of people who've given us advice, helped us understand the mechanism of how these things work. And we've really thread that needle very finely, and we're in the last stages of it. So it's a really good feeling, and we just keep moving.
And I also want to say that you are sort of tailor-made for this endeavor, given your background, your training, your adeptness at all these Excels and mathematical patterns, and not just the spreadsheets, but everything. The analysis, your computer savviness, your ability to articulate, to write. Obviously, if you're writing your briefs, you obviously had an aptitude for figuring out the law. Just your analytical mind, and then your very personable way of being that has made people listen, because you've told me that people are listening to you. They're really understanding when you give these presentations.
Yes, it's true. When we do the presentations, because they're so visual, I've done a PowerPoint presentation, and it's about 40 slides, and we go through the evidence, and we go through the law. We show people the actual statutes and the actual constitutional provisions that require all these things. And people use their God-given discernment, and they go, yes, hello. This is exactly, we believe her because she's shown us all this evidence, right? I mean, we're not just making this up. And that gives a lot of credibility. And then I get, word of mouth across the state. People call their other counties and say, oh, you need to have Dr. Pressley come present to your group. And then they have me present, and they give donations, and they want to be kept up to date on what's going on, and they want the rule of law to be upheld. It's very simple, Sophia. It's so, like I said before, it is the easiest issue I've ever been an activist on in my life. I'll be 55 in December, and everyone agrees with this. And I've presented to Democratic clubs. I've presented to Republican. I've presented to Green Party, to Libertarian Party clubs. I've presented to Rotary clubs, Optimist clubs, retiree clubs, church clubs, anybody, because it's nonpartisan, and everybody agrees. They want honest elections. Everyone agrees with this, except those few that are stealing it, that are part of the corruption, and that understand this is happening.
Yeah, they only need a couple of hands here and there to switch out those cards. I have been speaking for a couple of years on the really profound material difference between what I call the three-dimensional world and the two-dimensional world. So the two-dimensional world is flat, 2 dimensions. It's electronic screens, data and information that comes across electronic devices, and the news, the television, anything that is given to us from a two-dimensional property is very possibly adulterated and artificial in any and all imaginable ways. But the three-dimensional world doesn't really lie. And so that's the world of the paper ballots, the numbered ballots, the experiences people have, all of that very professional polling and everything that you conducted, setting up your race in your campaign. I guess I wanted to ask you how you managed to do that so efficiently and properly and thoroughly. But I'll ask you that in a minute. So the two-dimensional world, now that it is such a big part of our existence, it's actually the biggest part of our existence is two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional. People don't really occupy their three-dimensional lives in any active ways. They're sitting, looking at two-dimensional devices, getting input that could be completely artificial.
It's fabricated, yes, absolutely.
So,
That's right.
How did you create that campaign and that preparation for the election? How did you know exactly how to do it and do it so well?
Well, that's a good question. We had a lot of people help us. I had a consultant firm that supported Liberty candidates, and they really provided their services at a reduced rate, fabulously reduced rate, because they wanted to see me in there. They wanted to see someone honest and liberty-minded and cut the waste of this gravy train that was happening in Texas, in the city of Austin, Texas. And then we had a ton of volunteers, block walking and phone banking. And, we had donors that were helping pay for signs and mailers and all of that, and the typical nuts and bolts of a campaign. But then the biggest part, I believe, is to be a candidate that's sincere and to understand what the people really want. The people don't want their taxes being high. People don't want the city government giving $9 million to Apple Corporation, that's the richest company on the planet. People don't want that stuff. So we had an easy job of going up and saying we're going to change, we're going to put a stop to all of this waste. So it helps to have a message that, your district really wants, and just the nuts and bolts of running an election. And I'm good at data sets. I'm good at analyzing voter data sets and all that, so I would do that for my campaigning. I didn't have to pay someone to do that for me. We did that, and I actually did my own designs. I did my own designs of flyers and mailers and signs, and didn't have to pay anybody to go design those things for me. So, it really was a grassroots, basic campaign that did really, really well. And then, I was not allowed to hold the position that I believe I won. And I'll tell you another thing, candidates that challenge these issues, challenge these election results, you have to know that you won. Because I'll tell you what, I couldn't be going as far as I am right now if I didn't know in my heart and in my soul that I had won that election and that I should not be treated as a victim. And I'm going to stand up for myself and stand up for my district and stand up for those volunteers and those donors that gave me money. And I think candidates owe it to those people. You ask these people for their help, and then when the time comes and your election was stolen and you don't do anything about it, candidates, I really want I want candidates to hear me if they're listening to your podcast that you guys owe it to your donors, owe it to your volunteers, you owe it to yourself to stand up. And the support will be there because people are thirsty for candidates to step up and not take it anymore. And people will support you financially. You may have to do the legwork and ask them for help and educate them about why you think it was wrong. But so be it. They're there to help you. And we have to have candidates stand up because they have the legal standing that's required in these courts.
Can I ask you another question? There's a very big voice in Austin, and that is Alex Jones. Have you crossed paths with him? Has he?
Yes, I have. Alex is a friend. I've been on his show a couple times, and David Knight has interviewed me. Leanne McAdoo has interviewed me, and they have been fabulous. They have followed our case. Rob Dew is a good friend, and and his audience they're the perfect audience for this because they have been thirsting for how does this happen. And for us to get the evidence that we have, and we're the first in the country that's ever gotten it at this level, they've been a big supporter. I would love to get on Coast to Coast if that's an option. If you have any connections with him or any of your listeners have connections with George Norrie or the Coast to Coast Radio, I would love to get on there because he's interviewed Bev Harris before, and this is just a kind of a progression of all the work she's done. I go on. I do anybody that asks me to do a presentation in Texas, I go. No matter where they are, I drive and I go and I present, and I go on any radio show that wants to have me because the main thing is to get the word out. Get the word out to candidates. Get the word out to voters. Get the word out to these states and these election judges that what's happening and what they can do about it.
Yeah, no, and you're so good at explaining it. I mean, I know you asked me to look at a number of different briefs and replies, and I was looking at those thinking, oh, there's so much here. What we need is a simple overview, and then I need to ask my questions, and you've made your case for me. I mean, this is amazing. This is very exciting, actually. And only $15,000 stands between America as it is and America as it could be, right?
Well, it's true because I'll tell you one thing, the rest of the country watches Texas. And, what we do really is a benchmark and it is a precedent for the rest of the country. And here's what I believe, Sophia. I believe if we across the country could have numbered ballots, whether they're electronic or paper, I prefer a paper ballot. We can count them electronically, okay, because everybody likes the convenience and all of that. But you got to have a paper document to go back to for a recount in case there's a problem, okay? And when you start having a few recounts that aren't matching the electronic results, I'll tell you something, it's going to stop. That fraud will stop in its tracks, okay? That paper ballot with a number on it that the voter sees and that only the voter sees, and it's very, you maintain the secrecy of the ballot, you're going to put a stop to a lot of fraud in this country, okay? But a lot of states don't have numbered paper ballots even. So if we can get this done for Texas, we can get this done for the rest of the country. And then we're on a better track to honest elections and fair representation and having our representatives pay attention to us. Because what about this, Sophia? What if your state senator or your state House representative or your congressman that goes up to Washington, D.C., what if they know we don't matter? What if they know their election's stolen? Okay? What if they know? This would put an end to that. Because at this point, with these elections being corrupted, you cannot even vote these people out. You can't get them out because they're protected. And some of them, I would present to you, they know they're protected, so they don't have to listen to us.
Well, of course. I mean, we know this. This is what's reflected in
That's
what they
right.
do.
What do? You don't keep voting. You don't keep giving money to an opponent who's going to keep losing. Even if they are winning, they're going to lose. Do you keep giving money to these systems, or do you start addressing the election system, the electronic component of it? Unless you do that, all of this is for naught. You can give all the money you want to these candidates who are going to run against these corrupt incumbents, but it's not going to matter because we've got a corrupt election system, and we've got to have a numbered paper ballot for a recount, and that's boiling it all down. That's how you get an honest election system in this country. You have a lot of distractions, Sophia. We have a lot of distractions about dead people voting, illegals voting, blah, blah, blah. That is a shiny object. Ignore that object and focus on a numbered paper ballot backup to your vote, okay? That's the answer. We've narrowed it down. We've threaded the needle to that point, and that's the answer.
Right. We have to take that two-dimensional fraud possibility, erase it completely, and turn this back into a three-dimensional paper world. That's it.
That's numbered, that the voter sees. I'm going to add those two things because that's the issue, okay? Because if you see your number, and when you go to a recount and that number is changed in the choices, then you know there's fraud. Someone's going to be prosecuted for that.
Yes, you're exactly right.
And it's going to put a stop to it. It's going to just cut it to its knees, okay? Now, you can still stuff the ballot box with fake ballots, but I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of people to do that, and they're going to talk, and you're going to catch them. The electronic is the bigger hitter. You got to address that. A numbered paper ballot backup to your vote that's used in a recount is the answer. And because of the work we've done with this case, we have really jettisoned all the other distractions and focused on that.
No, this is excellent. I'm so glad. I think you've got a beautiful gem to present to the whole world, as you say. And I hope there are people who are going to help you go the last leg. And it's not just the money, it's the attitude. I think people should be very, very excited that you've gotten as far as you have, there must be a reason your name is Pressley, because you have pressed.
Oh my gosh, you're hilarious. I never thought of that. Oh, you're going to make me cry. You're so funny. That's precious. And that's my maiden name. I'm married, and I kept my maiden name because I have a lot of patents and stuff in my maiden name. You are so funny. I love that.
I'm very happy that I had this chance to talk to you on my podcast, and I'm very excited for you and very grateful, and I'm sure people who listen are feeling the same way. Good for you. I mean, we all have to jump on this wagon and give our thanks and gratitude to Dr. Laura Pressley. It's very, very exciting, and we're going to help you go the rest of the way. I know that that's a very short stretch, and it might have some amazing, amazing results. So thanks for coming on my show, and I'm so pleased to have met you, and I'm going to get on your mailing list so that I can receive those updates myself. And maybe when it's all said and done, how long do you think it's going to be for a decision? Do you know?
Well, there's like I said, we're in the mid phases right now of the Texas Supreme Court, all those stages that they have. So probably a year. I would say in a year we'll have an answer. That's what I think. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot to be done in that year then by all of us.
There is. and you know what? One thing, Sophia, I'm here to help any candidates. Primaries they're going to hit next year in many states, and I'm here to help any candidate that wants to run, that wants to hold accountable any type of election results that they think are not accurate. I'm here to help them. I'm here as a resource. So, I just want to offer that.
Well, that's also very generous of you. Yes, thank you so much for being that way. Thank you very much, Dr. Laura Pressley, and I hope you have continued success and inspiration as you go forward.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and bless you for wanting to deal with this topic. It's not easy. It's not trivial. It's complicated, and thank you for your discernment and your intelligence for understanding it. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sophia, encouraging you to visit my online store, avatarproducts.com, where you will find a wonderful thing called magnesium cream. Magnesium is a mineral we desperately need due to the fact that it alkalinizes our blood, and, another bonus, it relaxes muscles. So all you athletes or computer addicts with workout soreness or stiff necks, use a little magnesium cream on a regular basis and feel the kinks getting looser. Magnesium is the dominant ion in the cell and facilitates hundreds of biochemical exchanges. Using it transdermally through the skin means you can put it right on those chronic pain spots, and it still gets absorbed to work systemically. A 3-ounce tube is easy to carry around and a great gift for aging parents, introducing them to natural chemistry for rapid pain relief for arthritis and joints, and great overall cellular support. It's at avatarproducts.com in the Sun and Skin section.